What do you get when you combine a world-class EMS physician and medical director
I speak pretty good English for a guy from Detroit.
with an EMS veteran and all-around nice guy?
Well, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Oh, that's so good. Oh, my God.
Well, you get the EMS show. Taking it to the people, here's your host, Dr. Ritu Sani and Mike Vercast.
Well, howdy doody, everybody. Welcome to episode 4 of the EMS show. Mike Vercast, Dr. Ritu Sani, and he's giggling because, you know, I got busy on the old video editor and made us a little shindig.
It's awesome.
Yeah, it turned out pretty good.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love all your work, you know.
Well, thank you. Yeah, you know what? I try to take it to the people. just like Rob says, you know, that we're taking it to the people in the intro. So I like that.
That's right. That's right. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. Today's been a long day. Most of the time we spent it together today.
Yes, we did. Virtually together.
Yeah, virtually half the day, most of the day. But yeah, today, you know, beginning of the month, always all the meetings for everybody.
Yes.
So many meetings. But you know, good meetings, not so good meetings, happy meetings, sad meetings. Kind of all
meetings are meetings.
Yeah.
Somebody once asked me what do I do for a living, and I said, I meet.
Yeah.
I mean, I like meat, but yeah, I meet.
Yeah. There's a lot of meetings going on. Oh my gosh. Like I said, some better than others. We had our, monthly QA. We had a couple QI meetings, operations stuff. Like we're busy. We're just busy trying to make the world a better place. You know, I know the people that are watching can probably relate to that. You know.
Oh, yeah, both of them.
No, I keep telling you this. You're looking at one number, but you're missing the 327 people that are on Twitter right now.
Oh.
So, yeah.
All right. I didn't realize there were that many people on the Twitter watching us.
Listen, we got to do a couple jackassery things.
Sure. Jackassery away.
I know that we always do this a little bit, but the first thing I want to ask you about is what's in your cup? You have a Portland Trail Blazers cup. It looks like a wine glass. So what do you?
It actually is technically a wine tumbler.
I know.
But we do use it for cocktails. I'll be quite honest. But it is the drink that we affectionately refer to as a Janet, which is my wife's name. It is bourbon and bitters. Today they're orange bitters, and then the Luxardo cherry liqueur.
By the way, I just scored Luxardo cherry double whacker at Costco.
Double whacker?
Yeah, it came with 2. It was a 2-pack.
Oh, got it.
You didn't understand what double whacker meant?
I did not. I did not. I thought a double whacker was a person with 2 light bars on their home car.
It could be. I mean, it could be. There's no question.
That was at least in Pennsylvania. That's what we called somebody who had a light bar on their personal vehicle, a whacker.
Well, we oftentimes get people from Pennsylvania that are watching. I can't remember where Ed's from. I don't think I know Rob Walker's a Pennsylvania guy. There's a few other Pennsylvania people, but you know, I mean, with all due respect, there's nothing wrong with Pennsylvania.
No, it's where I learned how to do emergency medicine.
That's where you learned to be a doctor.
It's where I learned.
Yeah. Well, a couple things I want to get to. I didn't get to mine. I've got a little Burby tonight.
Nice, just a neat pour.
Just a little neat pour.
I generous pour though.
Yeah, of course it is. I went with the I can't even think of it. Why can't I think of it? Woodford Reserve Master Distiller. You had some of that at my house.
I did.
Yeah.
On my birthday.
Yeah, that one's almost gone. Which is a little disappointing. So I figured I'll go a little heavier tonight. It'll be fine, and I'll enjoy it. My back's giving me a hard time, so I thought, a couple OxyContins, little bourbon, and I'll be in good shape. By the way, we're going to talk about some Netflix documentaries, and I've got a couple of hot picks.
That's right. That was going to be a little dope sick humor there, right?
Yeah, it was a little dope sick. Probably
Yeah.
not something to make fun of, actually, on second thought, but whatever.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk about a thing. I want to talk about your trip to Houston recently.
Oh, yeah.
But before that, I wanted to just bring up real quick. By the way, what we're going to talk about today, we got a couple of things. We're going to talk about mask mandates are ending. So we're going to come back and we're going to talk a little bit about that because somebody sent me a message and I appreciate it so much that we're going to talk about it right here. Also, we're going to talk about a documentary that we watched called Downfall. I'll give you a little sneak peek right here. You might have seen it. You might have seen a post. If we're friends on Facebook, you saw me post about this. But we're going to talk a little bit about this, and then Dr. Sani's going to share a little bit of his own personal experience on responding to and during the aftermath of a commercial airliner accident. So anyway, that's what we're going to talk about today on this particular episode. So thanks again for hopping on with us, spending a little bit of time in your evening with us. But I wanted to just recap real quick Super Bowl halftime show.
Yes.
Like everyone has just gone crazy about this, Snoop, Eminem, Dre, whatever, best show ever in the entire world. Like better than anything ever since sliced bread. I don't get it. See,
Well,
Ed seems to agree with that.
I thought it really was.
But why?
But I don't, I don't have an argument for you against yours. The show that you like is probably the second best. I mean, I don't disagree. I can't argue with greatness, but this one was really pretty.
Yeah.
Julie Ryan did.
Yeah, exactly. Let me pull up that comment real quick because that's exactly what I was.
I don't know. There was just so much there that was
I guess the thing is it's not like I didn't like it. It wasn't like I didn't enjoy it. I just think it was just these bold statements of just how it was the best thing ever. And I just, it wasn't that great compared to what Ed says. Well, the one I'm comparing it directly.
The Super Bowl halftimes are just disappointing, right?
Well, yeah, totally.
I mean, when they put Madonna out there with her walker, that was like whatever, right? and Madonna was a showstopper when she wasn't, trying to not fall over. Yeah. But but that one was really good. I thought it was really good, and it was really. For somebody who likes 80s and 90s music, it was really good.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it was a nostalgia trip for Generation X. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah. I'd agree with that part.
But
to me, so was more so was I just couldn't, the comparison I was trying to make was to the Prince doing Purple Rain in Florida.
But
right.
That's a great show too.
Not Purple Rain. I mean, he did Purple Rain, but it was the Prince halftime show where he covered all the usual ones. But there was just, I don't know how not you, I'm just saying, I'm speaking in generalities here. In my mind, there was just nothing better than him doing the song Purple Rain in a freaking rainstorm on the stage with, and you want to talk about, now I'm a big nostalgia guy. We're going to talk a little bit about that here in a minute on a revelation I just made about my wife last night while we were in bed, which is very disturbing. Yeah. Oh, wait a second. I got to look for that sound effect. You ready? Here it is right here. Wait. No, I don't think I got it. I was looking for a cool sound effect to play there. Maybe this one. Did you hear that?
Kind of more of a mystery.
Yeah, that's not the right one. But anyway, I was very shocked to learn this information about which I've been with since 8th grade, 1985, I should say. Anyway, I think Prince was better, but whatever.
I'm not going to argue. I mean, I thought Prince was fabulous, but I don't know. I really enjoyed that. I thought it was pretty outstanding.
Talk a little bit about your trip. You went on a little trip.
Yeah, I wanted to bring one thing up. So I went to Houston Visited my mom and dad. I don't know if they're watching. They often do, but I don't know if they're watching today. I met the Whackers. Um, but yeah, we went and saw my parents. Always a exciting and interesting time.
Sure.
But my kids hadn't really seen my parents much, well, since the pandemonium started. And my daughter, because one of the confounders is that she goes to a school that doesn't take Thanksgiving off, because in Canada they don't do the same Thanksgiving we do.
Right.
And so she had like her spring break, and my son lives here in Portland now, and so we went down there and saw them. But we were having this is what I wanted to bring up. We're having dinner at my brother's house. My parents live about 6 minutes from my brother in the north of Houston, in a town called the Woodlands. So we're having dinner at my brother's house, and he is making the Manhattans. No, was it Manhattans or was it
Old fashioned?
I think it was old fashioned. He was making the old fashions.
I like the Manhattan. It was very similar.
Yeah, it's the sugar syrup though in the old fashioned, right? He was making the old fashioned and doing the smoking thing. And he said, "Do you know the story about like Jack Daniels?" I'm like, "What do you mean?" He said, "Oh, I just heard on a podcast." They were talking about like the origin of Jack Daniels and Uncle Nearest. I'm like, "You were that was my podcast, brother?" Oh, right, it was.
Oh my God.
So I thought that was quite funny that my brother didn't even realize he'd been listening to us.
Yeah. Well,
Or
he knows
that
high
he'd heard
quality
that story from us.
He knows high quality shit when he hears it. That's all I can say about that.
That's
By the way,
right.
I want to just do a quick shout out for our next episode, which will be out on March 24th. We have the opportunity to have a discussion with Dr. Mike Levy out of Anchorage, Alaska. And I think, and by the way, you don't know this, but I think I've come up with a name for these, and it's going to be called the Getting to Know series.
Well, I saw that you had posted that on your on the post, and I said,
but I
that
kind of
sounds
like
it.
that, like, because
I liked it.
that's really what we want to do as part of the EMS show, right? We're going to have some jackassery, this kind of stuff. We're going to talk about random hot topic things, but really our second podcast of the month that we do, because we do two, we really want to be more person focused. So, we talked about some EMS stuff, but we wanted to just learn about Dr. Levy, like learn about where did he go to school? What did he do? We learned fascinating information about like working on the reservation, going to Alaska, his fascination with the race cars, and going for an oil change in his VW Touareg and coming home with a 911 Porsche, right? Like lots of just cool stuff about the person, not necessarily the medical director or whatever, but just the person, Mike Levy. So that's what we really want to try to do. So if
there are a lot of great people in EMS, and I think we want to try to share them, give them an opportunity.
So if that's you, like watching or listening, then shoot us, go hit our DMs, man, on the Facebooks or the Twitter or whatever, and let us know.
Yeah. And let us know who you want to hear from.
Yeah. And maybe it's you. Maybe you want to come on air. I don't know. If you have an interesting story to tell, maybe you do. We'd love to have you. All right. So here's this revelation. Laying in bed last night.
Yeah. With your wife.
With my wife. And thank you for that. Yeah. If I left that part out.
You said you were in bed with your wife. Make it clear I wasn't there.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Oh, by the way, Ed says, I bet the Whackers enjoyed this year's halftime show. Oh, let me hit that. Anyway, so we're laying in bed, and I have a couple of YouTube. I usually hit YouTube, I get ready for bed. I climb in, and I bring up YouTube because I have a couple of channels that I subscribe to that I'm interested in. One of them is from a guy named Rick Beato. Rick Beato is a music producer. He's a music guy out of LA, and fascinating to watch. He's got a series on there called "What Makes This Song Great." And he basically breaks down musically just some of these amazing songs, right? Like all the way, I mean, everything from Beatles to Metallica to whatever. I mean, it doesn't matter. Like there's just everything everywhere. That's cool. So one of the things, songs he did on that was just released was this song. And we're going to get this blurred out, I'm sure, because we do not have permission to use it, but I don't care. Listen to it. Oh, God bless America. I screwed up my thing here. So that's all I need. That's all I need to know, right? Tears for Fears. Everybody wants to rule the world. So this was his latest episode. And I'm watching, and I love what Rick does is he really breaks down chord progressions, the scales that people use, the interesting, like nerdy part of the music stuff that I just love it to death. And so I'm watching it, and anyway, so I finished my YouTube stuff and lean over, and there's Michelle, and we're talking, and I was just like, man, that is a really like quintessential Tears for Fears, right? Like everybody wants to rule the world, like songs from The Big Chair. Like if I could just sit here and rattle off Head Over Heels, like, I mean, all of the 16 Candles, just like, I mean, there's just so many like Tears for Fears. That's like, when I think 80s, I think 80s.
That's spot
That's like,
on 80s.
That's quintessential 80s. And she's like, I'm like, what does that look about? She goes, yeah, I don't really like that. I don't really like that. And I said, well, what do you mean? Like, because at this point I'm like, who are you? What are you talking about? You know how nostalgia I am. Like I love like everything 80s. Like I got 15 swatches over here, right? Like right. I'm into that. And
that's the thing. Like, if you all have a swatch that you don't use, just send it to Mikey V.
Yeah, I love me swatches, man.
I know.
I've had so many people ask me to do like a video on my swatches. Maybe I'll do that sometime. But anyway, like she's not down with Tears for Fears or really a lot of that style of 80s music. She was more Madonna, Tiffany, Debbie Gibson, that end of stuff. But she's like, I don't listen. I didn't like White Snake. I didn't like any of these other, things. And I guess that's fine. But how do you not like Tears for Fears? Like, I mean, with a straight face, how do you not like that?
I don't know. I wouldn't put Madonna in with Debbie Gibson and Tiffany, by the way. Well, there's sort of an order of magnitude and difference in talent. And no, Will, there will not be any EMS discussion tonight.
Bill Toon always sitting back, throwing lobbing little grenades in. We need to have Bill on.
Yeah.
No bow tie though. All right, let's get into our first topic. Yes, we always do 15, 20 minutes of jackassery. So you tuned in just in time. God, what a jerk. He's going to text me later. Yeah. So if you haven't figured it out yet, see what Bill missed was that we already covered what we're going to talk about. We set it up. Everyone knows what to expect. I mean, if you like to come in at 20 minutes after, that's fine. That's cool. Doesn't mean I don't like you. So here's a question. Our first EMS topic. Actually, let me do this. Because I have to do this. EMS show headlines. Here it goes.
The EMS show headlines.
I know you love that. I know you love it.
Love it. Love it.
Okay. Mask mandates across the country, at least in our area. We're out west, as a reminder.
Yeah, we're not Florida.
We're not Florida or Texas. Mask mandates are coming to an end this week, right? Like we got a few more days to go. And somebody sent me a question, and I thought this would be a great topic, and I'd be curious what the people watching, because I know there's going to be a diverse, opinion on this. But the question was basically this. In fact, let me pull it up so I don't misquote it, because I think it's important to get the question right. Okay, here's the quote. I've trusted the scientific community in regards to masking and vaccinations, but I'm not sure I'm ready to trust that it's time to do away with masks. What thoughts or opinions do you have on this topic? And I got to tell you, I hear that. Like I feel that, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I mean, it's quite the position to be in when so many haven't, right? Like I don't want to say bought into it, but have sort of agreed that masking makes a lot of sense. Vaccinations make a lot of sense. And now they're being told, hey, you don't have to wear your mask. And there's like, there's probably a lot of things at play here. What is your take on that?
I think there are a few things at play. Unfortunately, some of them are, I don't want to say not science-based. I do think one thing that's at play, though, is sort of a shift in strategy to some degree. And, I think the idea of doing all you can to reduce transmission in the community, and remember, when you're talking about public health, we're talking about community health.
Yeah.
So this idea, a lot of people are like, well, it should be an individual choice and freedom or whatever.
Yeah.
But the reality is that when you're looking at things from a public health perspective, you're looking at the entire population. And when you're talking about a pandemic, your goal is to reduce transmission across the entire population. So the kind of current change in sort of tenor from the federal government, tenor from CDC, dropping of the mandates, again, Florida, Texas never seemed to actually have COVID, even though more people died there per capita than anywhere else. But on the West Coast, our mask mandates are dropping this week. We had the 2 weeks of joy in July.
Indeed.
And that was about it. But I do think it reflects a significant change. And those who are for it will argue we're now in a new place in the life cycle of this infection, that we need to change our strategy, and that we need to, the idea of basically stopping all transmission or flattening the curve or doing everything you can to reduce transmission has passed. And now we are in this sort of live with it stage, as some people talk about. But I think that 2 years of pandemonium has driven some of that strategy change. I don't think it's purely based on kind of data necessarily. But I do think it reflects a change. And for those of us who've been fairly on the let's not try to get any single person infected or reduce the number of infections as much as possible, this is a change in philosophy that can be sort of hard to deal with. The other thing too is it's been 2 years, and I like walking around and seeing everybody without a mask on, going to Houston, where when I went to the grocery store and I was the only person wearing a mask, that was a little bit jarring.
Yeah.
But it reflects a change. I do think, for me personally, I'm just going to be very interested in what the numbers do. I sort of expect there'll be a little bump up in Oregon once the masks come off.
Yeah.
But I don't know. We'll see. The reality is, I always think of this as like almost like a probability game.
Sure.
Or for those of you who are nerds who play like Dungeons and Dragons, you roll like a 20 sided die and you end up with a probability. And what we do is we layer on all these different things that reduce probability, right? Vaccinations, 80% or 90, reduce the likelihood that somebody around you is going to have it.
Sure.
Staying apart reduces the likelihood that you will be exposed to it. Wearing a mask on the source patient reduces the likelihood that they'll spread it out. Wearing a mask on yourself reduces the likelihood that you will ingest it. All those things kind of put together. But I do think that if the community likelihood is low, then the additive components of putting masking and stuff are not as beneficial as if the community likelihood is a lot higher. So that's why, to me, it makes sense to sort of mask up when we're in the midst of an Omicron surge, when you have high positivity rates, and that it also is reasonable, especially if you're vaccinated, because even though you could get Omicron while you were vaccinated, you were still much, much less likely to get it. And if you got it, you were much, much, much less likely to go to the hospital with it. But you know, if the community risk, the baseline risk with no masking or anything is low, then I think that makes sense to sort of remove the mandate. What is interesting to me though is one of the arguments against mask mandates is the I hate to sound pejorative, but the freedom argument. You know, people should make their own decisions.
Yeah.
But one of the now that you hear the mask mandates are falling, the argument what I hear from people is, well, if the government's not requiring it, then it must be safe. Well, if you've spent a lot of time arguing that the government can't require it, then the safety you can't use that as an argument. You can't use that as an argument for you can't use that as an argument for freedom, if you will, if you're going to say that no mandate means everything must be safe. Yeah. So that's always sort of interesting. For me personally, I will probably, you know, in the 2 weeks of joy in July when we didn't have a mask, I still wore a mask in some places.
Yeah.
I wore a mask when I went to like grocery stores. If I was going to come in contact with a lot of people that I didn't really know much about them, then I still wore a mask for a while.
Yeah.
I think I wore a mask when I saw Black Widow in the movie theater.
That's right. You actually went to the movies.
I did, and it was really weird because there were a bunch of people there.
I went to the movies too. I once saw Ghostbusters. It was amazing.
I haven't seen it yet, and I
God
heard it's
dang,
nostalgia
bro.
fest.
Go see it. But anyway, I just think this is a great question, and you know, how much of this is, you know, it's been what we've been doing for 2 years. It's this, you know, this change all of a sudden where they're saying, I mean, there's already distrust out there and misinformation about stuff. I mean, I could see, you know, I mean, to Bill's point, you know, I shared his comment. He plans to wear his mask, you know, into the future, and he doesn't care what people say. And my wife's kind of the same way, right? She's got some immunocompromisation going on. Well, that didn't come out exactly right, but you know what I meant.
We followed you.
Yeah, and so she's like, you know, I'm not comfortable at this point, just sort of, you know, just being done with it, right? And I think there's probably a lot of people in that boat, you know, and really, I mean, I guess if you look at Oregon, I mean, we've been pretty, I mean, we've had probably mask mandates the longest. I mean, they're pretty close to within maybe a couple other states, California, you know, West Coast stuff, but you know, it is going to be a weird thing.
Yep. We also were 47th in deaths per capita.
You're right.
You know, we did pretty well in vaccination. And when we had Delta, you know, the places that were not vaccinated were the ones that saw all the problems.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting that I think we did really well. I know a lot of our people don't like our governor, but we did relatively well, kind of statistically. I think there were fair number of missteps from the Oregon Health Authority in terms of their communication style, and you know, these emergencies, just like what we're going to talk about next, these are all communications problems more than anything else. But I do think that part of the unease in going to unmasking, like when we unmasked in July, there was this really, I think, sincere belief that we were super close to herd immunity. 80% in Oregon, 80% of the population was vaccinated. And everybody was like, okay, this seems to be it. This could be it. But I think now people are feeling a little bit burned by Delta and Omicron. And I think that it's a little bit more unnerving. And I think that was sort of same strategy. I really do think there's a shift now. There is a shift of we're just going to live with this to some degree. And I think people who are immunocompromised are feeling a little bit uncared for by the community as a result of that.
Yeah, Ed brings up a good point about St. Patrick's Day. I mean, we were just talking about this earlier today. Is like, St. Patrick's Day is going to be
wild,
like wild. I tell you. Yeah, whatever. That's cool. And I mean, we're we've got a ragtag band at my agency, pipes and drums, and we're gonna go out and we're gonna do a few little places here and there. But really, it's going to be the first time in a couple of years we've been able to go out, and I mean that's our big major fundraiser that we do. And but I have a feeling though it's going to be a wild ass time out there.
Well, I'm going to the first round of the NCAA tournament on St. Patrick's Day.
Oh, nice.
So
is that here in Portland?
Yeah.
Oh shit. Yeah, I could give two shits about college basketball.
No.
Tell us the Final Four, then I'll watch.
I hear you. No, the first and the second, the
it's
first round is
baseball.
No, the first round is amazing because you have all these upsets and you have just wall-to-wall basketball for 2 days. It's fun. But again, so back to squirrel. I do think that this represents a big change in strategy, and I think that's uneasy for some people.
Yeah.
I also think when we kind of, we had lockdown in 2020, that when we stopped doing big lockdown, that was politically, we weren't going to be able to go back to that. And I think there's a chance that we may not be able to politically go back to universal masking either.
Yeah.
I also think that the federal mask mandate is going to probably end soon too. So by the time you and I fly to IAC, there might not be there probably won't be a federal mask mandate.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. But we'll see how that goes. We'll see how that goes. All right. Well, that was a good discussion. Let's move on to the next thing. And I want to talk about this documentary. I'm not sure if the people that are watching had all 5,600 people that are watching right now. So don't
6,
jam the
6,000 even.
Oh, is it 6,000 now? Sometimes it goes up. It's crazy. Anyway, I had the opportunity to, we were in between trying to figure out what to watch. And
I know that feeling.
Which we often find ourselves in. By the way, I just canceled Sling TV. Gone. Anyway, that's another squirrel moment. But we had the opportunity to watch Downfall, the case against Boeing. And so here's the short version of it. Short version, I mean, and we'll have some discussion, but if you haven't had a chance to watch this, I would highly recommend you go, because there are very, very many parallels we can draw to things in EMS from this. Like so you can use your imagination. Like this has inspired a couple of talks that I can think of right off the top of my head that we could do for an EMS conference or something like that. But the short version is this. You guys remember hearing about the 737 MAX. There were a couple of plane crashes pretty early on in the deployment. And what this documentary sort of goes into explain a little bit is sort of Boeing before a merger with a larger company, and sort of Boeing afterwards, and sort of the internal strife. And I'm getting some feedback. Are you hearing that or no?
No.
Okay. I don't know where that's coming from. And anyway, I was just blown away at the way this was handled from the Boeing perspective, because they essentially go into the culture of Boeing prior to an acquisition or a merger with McDonnell Douglas. And they interview lots of different people that just, that safety was like the number one thing. Anybody in that entire company had the permission, if you will, felt safe enough to say, you know what, we're not doing this right, and I don't like it. And those concerns were taken seriously. And so this documentary kind of goes through the development of this new aircraft, how they were sort of falling behind Airbus, which, by the way, I love me an Airbus. flying an Airbus twice on the way to IAC. Anyway, another story.
I didn't even look at the aircraft, but
yeah, we're on an Airbus.
okay.
But it just blew my mind sort of for the first time, really, I think, and something that, I mean, most of us have flown on an airplane. And so I think there's an inherent amount of trust we put in the people that design and build and engineer and take care of these things. and to find out sort of the shortcuts and just everything that they did with this particular aircraft to sell them at as it would turn out 700 people dying over a couple of plane crashes was pretty egregious, and something that I could not believe it if I wouldn't have saw it with my own eyes.
Wow. But the interesting thing too, you talked about trust, right? So it's the same amount of trust that our community has when they call 911. Yeah. They trust that our equipment is working. They trust that our crews are properly trained and supported, and they have the proper equipment. So there, yeah, I agree that there was a lot of parallels to sort of EMS. And as somebody who's been a previous air medical director too, a lot of the conversation around culture of safety, and there's a whole culture of safety movement in EMS too, but how their safety culture at Boeing seemed to have changed. Although I don't think personal experience tells me it may not have been as drastic or sudden a change as possible.
Yeah, I mean, there's always two sides to a story, right? All these sort of tend to lean one way or the other, right? Tiger King is no different. It's the same thing.
Yes, this was just like Tiger King.
Same thing. Hello, all you cats and kittens.
That's right. Hello, all you cats and kittens out there. Are you watching the Tiger King show?
Oh, no. In fact, I watched. We're diverting again, and that explains why now there's only 4,000 people watching. But I looked up the reviews on that. Absolutely terrible. Absolutely terrible. This is how they summed it up. It's like standing at the train station when the train left 7 hours ago. And I thought, well, that tells me everything. There's nothing else to tell in the story, right? It's so old, it's so worn down. It does not need to be a 8-part miniseries. However, if you haven't watched the Tommy Lee and Pamela one, you might want to watch that. Not safe for kids, by the way.
Oh, is that good? The Tommy Lee and Pamela?
Good. I mean, that's sort of a strange way to put it, but it's interesting. Put it that way. But anyway, yeah, I mean, we're all about the viewing habits of people here. Anyway, so this was interesting, and I wanted to use this as a catalyst to talk about another topic, which when I posted this, a lot of people said, I'm going to go watch it, check it out. And they were sort of blown away as well. But really it came down to a few parts and pieces, right? Like if we skimp on a few parts and pieces, no one in their right mind would ever have thought that something would have gone wrong. But and I don't want to ruin the documentary for people that haven't had seen it. But what I'll tell you is that they added a new safety system to this Boeing 737 MAX. And they didn't tell people.
They didn't tell anybody about it.
They didn't tell anybody about it. And the reason why they didn't tell anybody about that was because they sold it as you'll have to not train anybody. It's just a new version of this aircraft. There's no additional training. There's no additional competencies. There's nothing anybody's got to do. And so when they added this new safety system, which is
those new monitors we're going to get, right?
Yeah. No. Oh, don't even go there, because I thought about that at the same time. And we've actually in my past, we've actually chosen a specific cardiac monitor because of this same exact reason. Oh, there's hardly anything to worry about, right? Like it's essentially the same thing. It's just the new version. It's fine. Yeah, it's totally fine. And that's kind of what happened with this new aircraft. And so when the first crash happened, they said, "Oh, yeah, it's the pilot. The pilots are not
It's
trained
always the
well. It
pilot's
wasn't
fault.
yeah, it was all the pilot's fault. They're not trained as well. This airline, so Boeing really just shit on everybody. Then the second one happened, same thing, right? Oh, well, they don't know what they're doing. There's a training problem. They don't have the right people flying. They don't do whatever, until they discovered that just wasn't the case. So I really encourage you to go check out this documentary. It's on Netflix. If you have Netflix, go check it out. It was pretty eye opening. But do you have anything? Do you have anything else on this particular thing before we move into this next related topic?
Well, I mean, we can, for me, watching this was interesting. Again, we'll come back around, I think, to the fact that all emergencies are a communication emergency, and transparency and accountability are key. But for me, I had a little bit of a hard time with parts of it because they showed footage directly from crash scenes. Nothing, well, some of it was a little bit, some people would find disturbing, but it reminded me of my time that I responded to a airline crash.
Yeah.
And the sort of what happened after that and how that all went. So that kind of brought a lot of that back for me. And I think I was watching it with my wife, and Janet and I were like, well, I'm never getting on a plane again. God damn.
Oh, I had those thoughts too. I'm sure if you're
And
watching it or listening and you've seen it, you probably had the same thoughts.
and then I texted you and I was like, did I ever tell you that I responded to a plane crash?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
and I don't know that I recalled that right away. I mean, I'm sure over 10 or 12 years we probably talked about it at some point, but you happened to be on flight 427, September 8th, 1994. And one of the things that we thought would be interesting if Dr. Sani was willing to talk about it, because it was not probably an easy call. And interestingly enough, I've always had this recurring dream of watching a plane crash, a commercial airliner crash. And I don't know where it comes from. I don't know if it's this weird, overwhelming sense of anxiety about my world coming down. Like, I have no idea what it was, but if I'm telling you, there was a period for 10 years where I had this similar dream every week for 10 years. And it was always me watching this happen. And I don't know if that was something I feared. I don't know if that was something I don't understand where that came from. But you actually had the unfortunate or fortunate, or I don't know what you want to call it, opportunity to actually experience that in real life.
Yeah, it was 1994. I was a second year resident, and in my residency, we did a lot of EMS as residents, and I think you've heard me talk about Pittsburgh and the Jeep being the
Yep.
Jeep doc, and we also flew. We flew as crew members. We didn't fly like as a third. We had resident shifts, and you were paired with a nurse or a medic, and you did patient care. You started IVs and set up pumps and all that jazz.
The real shit.
The real shit. You actually worked instead of being the doctor and going,
right.
But I was actually working in the emergency department at the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center. I was working in our less acute side, and we heard in the Pittsburgh Medical Command, which was the online medical kind of area. They were stationed right next. They were stationed out of UPMC, and I'll never forget. Denny called us and said, "We have a Zulu," and that was the call thing for an actual plane crash. And our air ambulance system, all the local kind of ground stuff started converging on there. And so we heard there was a plane crash in the suburbs outside Pittsburgh near Aliquippa, and our our air ambulance system launched 2 helicopters. They launched one directly to the scene, which actually ended up being the first EMS unit to arrive
Oh,
on
wow.
scene. And they launched the second one, came to the hospital because they wanted to pick up a physician. Not quite sure why. I think the tool, we've talked about this. I think the tool that you bring is probably some amount of triage expertise, maybe some advanced skills, but mostly triage. But so they came to the hospital to pick up a doc, and they said, for 2, you're working on the less acute side. You're second year, so you've already been flying. Do you want to go? And I said, sure, I'll go. So I ran up and jumped into Stat Medevac 1 with Dave Gross, and Renee was my nurse. And I can't remember if, I think Uncle Dave was my pilot. So this is a crew that I flew with regularly, either with, I never flew with them together because you only flew with one. I jumped right in, Bill. But yeah, no, we ran up to the roof, helicopter landed, just jumped in, strapped in, and off we go. And at that point, you're just like, oh my God, what am I doing? You have all this adrenaline. There's the little part of you that does EMS that says, I don't want anything bad to happen. But if something bad happens, I want to be there to help.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely.
That part of you is the part that says, I'll go. But as soon as you get in the aircraft and you're going, you're like, I'm in a helicopter flying to a airplane crash. And that's kind of crazy. And then you're like terrified that, what the hell am I going to do when I get there?
Right.
What the hell am I doing? And the crash happened. I don't remember exactly what time, but by the time I took off, it was sort of dusk. Actually, the CNN footage from the scene shows the first helicopter with Ron and Lucy flying into the scene, like kind of at sunset.
Yeah, I was trying to find it. Yeah, it was about 7, right around 7:03 p.m.
Yeah, and so it wasn't quite dark when we got there, but so we got over the scene. And for those of you who fly in helicopters, you know that the pilot's going to do, if you're flying into a scene, the pilot's going to do a fly around survey to where they're going to land. And we could see our other helicopter and where it was parked. So we knew that was where we were going to land. And we were in a Dauphine.
Oh,
so our first helicopter in was a BK 117, but we were in a Dauphine, so a little bit of a bigger aircraft. But so we did this fly around the scene, and I got to tell you, all I saw was a hole with smoke coming out of it. That's it. That's all you could see. And we pulled in for a landing, and we got out, and we were met at this. We were right, basically 100 yards from the crater, if you will, 150. And we were basically told when we landed that there are no survivors. That at this point we do not anticipate you will need to fly any patients, and if there will be any transports. And it was our flight nurse and medic who were first on scene that actually sort of made that determination.
yeah.
And then what was very interesting is that then I remained on that scene for probably 3 or 4 hours as initially the first wave of ground rescuers came in. We were right after them, and they came in and all kind of rushed to the scene. And then as more and more of them sort of came in and did that, there was greater and greater realization that there were no survivors and that there was debris kind of everywhere. And so then the challenge was trying to, in some ways, convince rescuers that you need to pull out. The other thing that struck me as interesting was the first ambulance in is the last ambulance to leave.
Yeah.
Right? Because everybody's parked, everybody's going in. And I got to tell you, I didn't go in. So I didn't see what those mostly men and some women saw. I saw some of that later, but I saw some debris around, but they went down there and they saw things that you don't want to see.
Yeah.
And what was interesting to me is as this was all changing from a life-saving operation to sort of a kind of safety, make sure there's no fires, make sure there are no as people started coming back out, it was about 3 hours before everybody else got out.
Yeah.
The first group in, some of those folks looked awful because they were pretty shook by what they saw. And that's one of the things I remember about that scene is, and one of the things to think about in a situation like that is that the rescuers the stress on the rescuers is quite obvious, but also it's not the same. Like the stress that I underwent was not the same. If you talk about the air side, the two helicopters that responded, the flight nurse, and I don't remember who the pilot was on the first pilot on the first helicopter in, but I knew who the nurse. I still remember who the nurse and medic were, and they were very shook up. And I think one of them quit as a result of it. And so, trying to get people out of that situation in a timely manner is, I think, something that people don't think about when they talk about how do you respond to something like this.
Yeah.
So it was interesting. And then, by the time we got settled and everything, it was dark and we just stayed on scene and we made ourselves available if any of the rescuers needed any kind of assistance.
Yeah.
And which turned out to be, nothing physical. Nobody got injured or anything like that. But again, the things that I remember about that night are the flying around and seeing this hole in the ground. And by the way, there was nothing. There was zero, and there was nothing that resembled an airplane that I saw. Zero. When we flew around the scene. And then the realization that I'm here to help, and then there was nobody to help.
Yeah.
And then seeing the kind of just sort of stricken and just kind of ashen look on the faces of the last group out, who happened to be the first group in. So that was really, and that's something that's obviously stuck with me kind of my whole career.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then 70257. Yeah. And kind of going forward from that, they set up a morgue on the airport grounds to collect debris and, for lack of a better word, human remains. And they asked me if I would be the EMS liaison to that. So I did that for a couple of days. And so the scenes in the Boeing documentary where they show them sort of bringing debris in,
Yeah.
those were very real to me. They didn't show the stuff that I saw too, which were literal human remains that were not, they were this big.
Yeah. Not
Yeah.
intact.
They were not intact. And kind of the how that played out. And it was interesting. We can talk a little bit about the after kind of. Well, there's actually a neat story too, but I felt like I was, I was 20 something, pretty strong guy. I was an emergency physician. I'd seen it all. There was another plane crash about 30 days later, 35 days later, that wasn't the similar issue as this. But I remember quite clearly watching TV and seeing that there was a plane crash, and they had said that there was no survivors. And the governor of the state that plane crash occurred in issued a direct order that we were hopeful people and that we would not declare no survivors. And I'm ordering EMS to continue the work to try to find survivors. And that upset me so much because after what I saw, what it was like for those people to be like directly in the scene, I just was like, you have to understand, you're damaging your people when you do things like when you did that. Yeah. That was when I realized I need help and decided to talk to somebody about it. But yeah, it was a little bit, it kind of brought it all back to me to some degree. And again, it's something, I think all of our experiences make who we are. So, it's something that makes me who I am. It's certainly one of the things that makes me care about EMS people, and not just the fact that I think EMS people are the coolest, because they are, but I care that we're not harming our own people by our practices and what we ask them to do. And I think this is one of the things that kind of built that into me, is this experience. So.
Well, I know we had talked about before that, you were going to share some of that, and I mean, obviously I appreciate you and I love you, and thanks for sharing that. And I know that's tough, and I don't know what else you say after something like that.
Yeah. I mean, just a couple other things. So there's been a couple books written about this crash and the investigation. And what's interesting to me is this is before Boeing's merger with McDonnell Douglas, but Boeing's response to this crash was that it was pilot error.
Same thing.
They basically stonewalled the investigation everywhere they could. And turned out what happened was it was a $10 part. It was not I think it was a $10 part. Maybe it was a $5 part. I don't know. It was not pilot error. What had happened is this part had gotten frozen, and it had apparently regularly froze during flight.
Like literally frozen?
Little frozen, because you're flying at, sub-zero or below. Yeah. And it had a problem where it basically reversed polarity, and it affected, this is where it has something in common with the 737 MAX. And this was also a 737.
Yeah, it was a 737 3B7, which is a model I had not heard of, but yeah.
It basically reversed polarity. So when the pilot pushed the stick forward, the elevators went down to push the plane up. When you push the stick forward, the nose is supposed to come down.
Right.
As though to play Microsoft Flight Simulator, no. And so what they ultimately figured out is that the pilot pushed the stick forward, the nose came up. Well, the natural response, if your nose is coming up, is to do what?
Push it more.
Push it forward, farther. Yeah. So he pushed it farther, causing the nose to go up higher, which put them in a stall. And they went straight down into the ground. I believe the flight data recorder said that they were at 80 degrees when they struck the ground, and going over 300 knots. So there was not, and it was all, and the other thing that's interesting in comparison to the story with the Max is that the pilots had never been trained on something like this happening before, because there was not any kind of anticipated problem. And so at least Boeing didn't change something and hide it. And that the pilots had less than 10 seconds from when the problem started to basically being at the point of no return, which is exactly the same problem with the 737 Max.
Yep, that's exactly what I was going to say. They ran simulation after simulation and just basically determined that, on an unfamiliar problem, if you don't do these particular steps within 5 or 10 seconds, then you will never recover from that, and you will just auger into the earth at some point.
Yeah. And then Boeing fought it, and I think it took them almost 7 or 8 years before both the NTSB and the FAA both agreed that it was actually a mechanical failure. Yeah. And as a result, they had to replace this part on every 737. Boeing did, but they never grounded the aircraft. But there was another, and it was so much like the 737 Max, because there was another incident where this time the pilot recovered, reported that they were able to reproduce the thing in a lab setting, but it was rare, which makes total sense, right? Because Boeings weren't falling out of the sky. But if it happens 1 out of like 10,000 times, that's all it takes. So it took them a while. Yeah. But yeah. Now the only other interesting story. Do you know Katie King? Do you know my friend Katie King?
No, I'm not sure. It doesn't ring a bell.
Katie, when I worked at the state, was the lobbyist.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah. So she's the lobbyist for ASEP, Oregon's chapter of ASEP. And she was my lobbyist when I worked at the state. She worked for the state at the time. And she's a mystery writer. And her husband.
A mystery writer, did you say?
Yeah. Yes. And her husband, Dana Haynes. And if you're looking he writes thrillers, like spy thrillers and stuff like that, action thrillers. So if you're looking for like some good, fun, easy reads, look up Dana Haynes, Haynes. So she has this monthly group, or at the time, that meets, this mystery writers group. And she said, we've always wanted to have an emergency physician there to just answer our questions. Like, so people are like, well, if I cut the carotid, like how long does it take before somebody dies? That kind of stuff. She said, and she says, you'll meet Dana, who at the time was not her husband, but you'll meet my significant other, Dana, who also writes like thrillers, and he's working on one now, and he's going to talk about that. And so I go to this dinner. We're at like a Chinese restaurant, and Dana Haynes is the Portland Tribune editor. He's the editor in chief of the Portland Tribune right now. Great guy. And so he's there. I meet him. He's very nice. And Katie's absolutely spectacular and wonderful. And if she likes Dana, then clearly this guy must be good, right?
Sure.
So he gets up and he starts talking about the book that he's writing, which is about a doctor who responds to a plane crash.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm like, wait, what? And it turned out not to be exactly the same. It was about a group of investigators but the lead investigator was a physician, and they respond to these plane crashes. They're part of they're this GO team and this and that. But he based the entire crash on Flight 427.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, Dana, this story sounds vaguely familiar.
Mm-hmm,
Did you? Because he started talking about like the investigation piece and what they're going to find. And he twisted it because he wanted the part to be, it's been a while since I read the book, so I can't remember if it was like, some kind of sabotage or something, but it was based on that crash. And I said, did you base this on flight 427 out of Pitt that crashed in Pittsburgh? And he's like, yeah.
Maybe. Yeah.
How did you know that? I said, yeah, I responded to that crash. So there was just this weird coincidence, and Dana and I have been sort of linked, and I have every one of his books too. So you should buy them. But it was kind of this odd, weird coincidence that he was writing a thriller novel based on this crash that
you were on
respond to. Yeah, or been one of the many people that responded to.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that, buddy.
Well, thank you for letting me. It's like everything else. The more you talk about it, even though it's been 26 years. I mean, 28 years. It's still, it created a response in me to see that on the
documentary.
On that documentary. So I thought I would share it.
So another one I think everyone that's in our business should watch is called Dope Sick. I didn't get a picture of it, but it's got Michael Keaton in it. It's about Purdue Pharma, the sort of development and release of OxyContin and all the sort of, people that sort of got caught up with OxyContin and then the opioid crisis and the whole nine. It's very well done. Very well done. If you haven't had a chance to see that, have you seen that?
I haven't seen it yet.
Oh my gosh. So Michael, just real short in there and we'll get us out of here. But the short version of it is Michael Keaton. The whole show opens up with him testifying in front of Congress. And he's a country physician, lives and works in a very small town in Virginia, takes care of all the coal miners. That's what he does.
Virginia or West Virginia?
Virginia. Not West Virginia.
Okay, just because the original, there's some good documentaries that talk about West Virginia.
Yeah, no, this one is Virginia specifically. But anyway, and so it's sort of fictionalized a little bit, I think. But anyway, just sort of goes through the whole thing, and it has all these little individual stories about these characters that have sort of interweaved into his life, and then the Purdue Pharma side, and anyway, there's just really breaking news really about Purdue Pharma, as in the news yesterday, that they are still paying out settlements in the billions with a B for opioid stuff. So pretty crazy stuff, but definitely check. I think it's on Hulu. I don't remember, or one of those, but anyway, just Google it. You can find it, but it's called Dope Sick. Like, I feel like they could have come up with a better name for it, but nonetheless, the actual movie itself is really great. So anyway, well, buddy, we're just over an hour. I think that was pretty good. Thank you again for sharing your story. And I know some people in the comments, Samantha was there. Hi, Samantha. I don't know if you're still there.
Hi, Samantha.
Thanks for jumping on, and she has the same thoughts. Thanks for sharing that experience with us, and that was awesome. So our next podcast will be released on the 24th. Again, that's with Dr. Mike Levy. You'll get to learn a little bit about him, and that podcast is a little bit different. There's a lot of jackassery. Holy shit! You get this guy in the same room with another medical director, and it was. Man, Bill Toon, don't listen to that one. You'll have a fit, because it was 30 minutes of just jackassery.
Well, we cut out half the jackassery.
I had to cut out of stuff, and it was still over an hour and a half long.
But a bunch of it was also before we started recording.
A lot of it was. Agreed with that. So anyway, I don't know what I'm choking on. It's very professional. I know that. So anyway, let me get us out of here. You ready for that?
I'm ready.
All right. On behalf of Dr. Ratusani, Mike Verkest, you've been watching the EMS show live here on Facebook and Twitter. And if you're listening on the podcast, we appreciate you spending a little bit of time with us. So we will get out of here. We want you guys to have a great night. Stay safe, and we will definitely talk to you soon.
Hey, thanks for listening to the EMS show. Let's continue this conversation. What do you say? Check out the official Facebook page and Twitter feed. The EMS show is a Fire Dog production.